Are you ready to change the status quo? We could significantly decrease the rates of domestic violence in our communities if we made this one paradigm shift. Why are we still using incident-based models when we're assessing for and when we are criminally charging perpetrators of domestic violence when all the current research and definitions really show that this is a systematic pattern of behaviors over time, and they increase in intensity and severity over time. So if you are currently trying to get others in your world, professionals, family, friends, to see what you're experiencing or to understand what you're experiencing, or you are a professional in the space supporting survivors and victims of domestic violence, narcissistic abuse, and coercive control, this is for you. So our current model that is really outdated is incident-based. So what does this mean? So we are looking at domestic violence as single physical abuse incidents. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is that these single incidents can't occur without the patterns of coercive control before. So if we are solely looking at the incident, we are missing our opportunity to educate and to help people get out of the situation before the risk and severity is high enough to make it physically abusive. So the common myth in our society is that domestic violence means you got punched in the face. But guess what? Just because you don't have a black eye does not mean that you are not being abused. And so our criminal courts, our family courts, and our child protection or dependency and neglect courts are all really looking at the incident, the single incident, and making their decisions based on that myth that domestic violence equates to physical violence. But this is why we are seeing rampant, huge rates of domestic violence in our communities. So what should we be looking for and what should we be assessing? Well, even as early as the 1980s, we knew to do this differently, but we're not. So we know that there are many different ways that an intimate partner can gain and maintain power control over their victim. And so even as early as the 1980s, we knew this, and yet we're still not using it within the larger system. So I'm not going to go through all of these today, but the link to this power and control wheel and other resources will be in the description below. But things like using intimidation, using emotional abuse tactics and isolation, minimizing, denying, gaslighting, all of these things are ways that allow a perpetrator of domestic violence to gain and maintain power and control over their partner. It will increase in intensity and severity over time, or if they feel like they are losing control. So we need to understand and start to hold people accountable for these behaviors that lead up to the physical abuse experiences. If we as professionals and victims can start identifying these elements of coercive control that lead to physical violence, then we could significantly decrease the risk and the rates of domestic violence. So renowned expert Evan Stark, his definition of coercive control behaviors is making a person subordinate or dependent by isolating them from sources of support, exploiting their resources and capacities for personal gain, depriving them of the means needed for independence, resistance, and escape, and regulating their everyday lives. He used the term hostages at home to explain victims of coercive control. So we as professionals really need to be able to identify these patterns and these behaviors. So what are the behaviors that we need to start assessing for and identifying so that we can start to decrease the risk and the rates of domestic violence? They are things like isolation, gaslighting, minimization and denying what's going on, using the children to abuse, limiting access to medical care, making all the financial decisions and not allowing a partner to have some autonomy and agency in there, making all the decisions about the sexual behaviors within the relationship, making threats to children, making threats to pets, right? This is not an exhaustive list, but we need, as a larger system, we need to be identifying these so that we can prevent those physically abusive incidents and, unfortunately, lethality and homicides that happen when we do not assess for these patterns earlier. Now, I know there's some pretty significant challenges to changing the status quo. One of them is it's so much harder to find direct evidence around these coercively controlling behaviors. And we need to start holding people accountable for these behaviors in order to shift the numbers. So, what can you do if you are a victim or a survivor experiencing coercive controlling behaviors? So, first is first, safety, right? So, if you are not safe, then you need to contact a domestic violence agency, or I'm going to share some resources in the description below so that you have access to some safety planning. So that is the most important thing, is to ensure yours and your children's safety. I would say start seeing a therapist, someone who understands what you're going through. And unfortunately, not all therapists do understand, because you're going to need to start identifying these patterns that may seem normal to you because you've been in it for so long. So start documenting these patterns in any way that you can document. Start reaching out for support from other survivors who have been in a similar situation. And when you start sharing your documentation with professionals, you're not going to use these blanket terms like, my partner is abusing me, they are coercively controlling. Unfortunately, we're not there yet as a larger system and understanding. And don't use the term, my partner is a narcissist. So what you're going to do instead is you are going to list the behaviors, those coercively controlling behaviors that they are doing. You are going to show that they are increasing over time so that someone can start to see the patterns, understand that you are not safe, and hopefully step in to support you. So if you are working with a therapist, an attorney, or maybe you want family and friends to understand what you're going through, then if you feel safe enough to do so, share this video with them so that they can understand where you're coming from. And if you're a professional working with survivors, share this to your other professionals so there's more of us that understand. So if we all work together, we can make this paradigm shift. So hit the like and subscribe button below to learn more. Go into the description to get all the resources I'm posting. Thank you for watching.